We talk about context shifts on this show often, and the ability for a context shift to either make or break the next 5 years of your business. And there is no context shift more powerful, more likely to just completely destroy your business in one day than regulatory changes. And that is where Alex Zweydoff comes in. He was introduced to me by Lacey Hendricks when we started diving into this topic. And, he's somebody that has just taken the reins of this idea of regulatory changes and gotten super, super involved. This podcast came fresh off the back of the NARPM Capital Summit and the Florida State NARPM Capital Summit. And it's all about essentially how Alex, his insight into the regulatory changes that are happening right now, the hot topics for property managers and how they can affect you, his Uber involvement and how he keeps up with all of it, and the benefits of doing it all and the risks of really not doing it, and just an insight into a guy that is I would just classify him as like an underdog overachiever with an insane amount of energy and a really likable presence. So enjoy this episode with Alex. Welcome to the Property Management Frame Breakers podcast. I'm your host, Pablo Gonzalez, and I am here to introduce you to the folks in the property management space that have broken the frame of what you may believe was possible. This podcast is presented by Vendoroo. It is your all-in-one AI solution for resolving your maintenance needs. Let's go. Alex Zweydoff, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. It's a beautiful day here in sunny Florida.
It is. Did you guys have like an unbelievable weekend also?
We did. We just got off that cold trip, so It's been nice to have a little heat. Kind of want the cold back a little bit. I'm a hot person, normally anyway, so I appreciate the cold.
Okay, got it. All right. So speaking of, I don't know how we can transition this. Speaking of cold, the government, am I right? You were listening to the show, right? We are talking a lot about this changing environment of property management, how when these big context changes happen, that's when, new problems arise or old problems that can be fixed in a new way happen. That drives this like innovation, drives the opportunity for disruption. One of the big context changes that I keep talking about is this idea that we went from like sleepy little property management industry to bam, president is saying how to do your job on TV. Am I right about that? Has this been going on for a long time? Do you feel like it's ramped up, and kind of give me like a little bit of a story arch there?
Well, so I've been doing this for almost 15 years, and I realized that recently on a panel with Harry Heiss. He's like, I've known him for 15 years, and I kind of looked over him and I was like, whoa. And I find myself frequently saying these days that the business has changed, the environment surrounding it, the what people expect from us property managers has changed. But the legislation 15 years ago was kind of like the wild, wild west. There was the regulations on the main things, security deposits, lease agreements, those kind of things. But they're really getting into it now. And, with all these different bills that are coming up from the federal level and not even just the state, it's definitely something that we got to keep our eyes on and make sure that we are advocating for ourselves before these things come into play.
The story I tell myself is COVID happened, Wall Street rushed into the space, big affordability crisis because mortgage rates went up, so now they're blaming it on property management. Is that accurate? Was it coming from something else?
I just think it was because all eyes kind of came on housing at that point, because that's when we had the CARES Act and the eviction moratoriums come out.
True.
That's coming back again right now with the Respect State Housing Laws Act. The only thing that's left from that is the 30-day notice to vacate. Everything else has kind of dissipated from that. And so it's making landlords, it's a lot harder for landlords to evict, rightfully evict tenants from their home because they're having to give a 30-day notice before they can even file that eviction. Yeah.
And that's nationally?
That's national, yeah. So it's all for properties that are federally backed. So Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, any Section 8 homes, things like that. So you have to give a 30-day notice if that tenant has not paid rent. So if they've not paid rent, you're waiting that time, whatever your grace period is in your lease, then you have to wait 30 days until that expires for you to file that eviction. It's giving them, during COVID, that made sense, with the instability of income and things like that. But we're way past that now. If you're not paying your rent, it's most likely a choice.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to frame the conversation because I like to give like a promise to our friend that's listening right now of I was just kind of validating those points to just make sure that I'm not going to take us down a bad path. But I want to talk about the impact, right? Like the potential impact of legislative changes. And I want you to give me, you just got back from DC. You've been campaigning on Capitol Hill here in Florida as well. So I want you to give me kind of like a what's out there update for everybody. And then we'll just talk about how it fits in the whole ecosystem of property management, right? So for me, this thing, right? Obviously, we are a AI company, and I'm out there beating the drum of like, you got to evolve technologically or else. I feel like this is way more immediate, right? Like, I feel like this idea of context changes regulation wise can be the thing that just completely kneecaps you if you're not prepared, even more so than a disruptive technology. How am I doing there?
I think you're definitely on the right path, and I think everyone needs to be very aware that there is going to be legislation coming on AI.
Yeah.
And it's already here, but ones that truly affect us, it's going to come,
Yeah.
There's a lot of cool things you can do with it, and there's a lot of scary things you can do with it.
Yeah.
For us, like in Florida, there was the squatter bill last year that was really big, and it's kind of taking off nationally. People are replicating our bill. We were the first ones to really pass that. And what it did is when you had someone that was squatting your home, they had certain rights, and you have to go through this drawn out legal process to get someone that wasn't in your have a right to be in your home out of your home. It's not as it was harder than an actual like non-payment of rent eviction.
Okay.
What we were able to do, and we were advocating this last year on the Hill, was to get these things put in place so that owners can get these people out quicker. They don't have to go through that drawn out process.
Yeah.
If they can't prove right to be there, they have to go. And so what it did is there was a lot of gray areas in that legislation where local jurisdictions saying this is a civil issue, you need to handle it that way. So if you call the cops to have them removed, they wouldn't do it because they had that gray area and they didn't know if they were going to cross that line and they were going to have exposure. So it basically allowed for them to have that right. If you can't prove us, that you have right to live here, whether a lease or mail or whatever that may be, we can remove you and trespass you from the property. So Florida kind of started that, and then Texas is doing it now, and a couple other states. So it's going to kind of travel. So it's kind of like monkey see, monkey do. So as legislations pass,
precedent, right?
Yeah, exactly. And as legislation passes, other states follow, and so it's we're going into session in a couple days here now.
Yeah.
So we're going to be seeing some new stuff come out.
Yeah. Before we get into too many more of the specific things that are happening, talk to me about. Let's just use the squatters' rights as an example. Am I hearing you correctly that there was a certain way of doing it, and then they passed the squatters' rights bill, and then now you guys are fighting the squatters' rights bill, or was it like you are trying to change something that just never had a law for it?
We were advocating for this bill. We were pushing for this bill. So this bill gives the owners the rights to their property. Private property rights is one of the big things that we push for. You should be able to do with your property what you want to do with your property, and within reason. But so what it did is it gave them the right to get these people out of their property.
Got it.
Because there was that gray area where they made it a civil issue, but now there's a law in place that basically says if you can't prove this, you can be removed from the property, trespass from the property. They wouldn't do that. The cops would step back, but now the cops have that green light. If they don't meet these criteria, you can do this, this, and this.
So that seems like a positive lever you could pull, right? If I'm hearing you can accelerate these rights, this is speed to revenue for not just the property owner, but for a property manager that gets paid when rent is paid. You can lose revenue if you have too many of your folks doing this. That's a big risk. Through government advocacy, you can pull a lever that allows you to have, better predictability of revenue and less of that risk involved, right? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, and everyone can agree with you own a property, you should be able to do with what you want to do with it.
100%.
And it passed unanimously in the Senate and the House. So we're gonna probably see that coming along. Is because there's some states in California you can be there for years and years and years.
I've heard about California.
And you just don't want that. You imagine you leaving your home from vacation for a weekend. You come home, someone else is living in your home. All your stuff in there, just living in there. How would you feel? Now take the income side out of it. Take the income side of it. That's your home, your safe space. They come in there and they take that space from you.
Yeah.
That's what's happening.
Yeah. So that is just closing one giant loophole, right? That was there.
It provided clarity.
And providing clarity, right? Is there an example of something where something got passed, property managers weren't at the table, and now that affects kind of like the way that you have to manage your revenue or you have to manage your operation?
Not anything recently, because thankfully, with NARPM, for the apartment association, all these people have really bought into governmental affairs. I'd say pre-COVID, it wasn't really something that people we're concerned about as much. PACs have gotten bigger. People have been investing into PACs more because they understand that, here in Florida during COVID, we were made essential. Property managers and realtors were made, and real estate agents were made essential because of the advocacy work that these groups are doing. Some states, they weren't allowed to work for 8-9 months because they didn't have that support. So when you have that seat at the table, you don't end up on the plate.
Yeah, you said that to me before, right? If you don't have a seat at the table, you end up on the plate. So the states where real estate services became essential workers were the ones that people had a seat at the plate. The ones where everybody really, really suffered worse was folks that weren't getting involved in this type of stuff, and like they just didn't have a voice.
Exactly. And a lot of when these legislatures are making these bills, they're coming from issues that people have had, but they necessarily don't see the full picture.
Yeah.
Rent control, for example, it sounds great.
Yeah.
It's been proven that it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And it's very important that we're in DC, we're educating these legislators to let them know, hey, this is going to affect this. We were in DC last year. Kim Godfrey from Second Nature was there, and we were talking to Congressman Frost, and he thought that, I'm going to say a bad word here, excuse me, so you're going to have to bleep this out. The junk fee bill that was being proposed last year, he thought that property management companies only work for big hedge funds and, the big conglomerates. And we were there to tell him that no, majority of our clients are mom and pops, small businesses. They're landlords that have a one-off property that inherited it, or they aren't these big companies. And if you tell them they can't charge application fees and screen these tenants appropriately, if they can't, freely, protect their property through these certain things that we've put into place, this is going to affect them. And this is their business. This is their, grocery store in the corner.
Yeah. It seems like a fun role, right? Like on top of how important it is, this idea of like government advocacy, it's like, hey, go to Capitol Hill, educate senators, like advocate for yourself, rub elbows and stuff like that. Is it a rewarding thing from like an activity standpoint?
I love it. Let me say this. I didn't understand it till I went to my first trip to DC. I think it was in 2019, so it's pre-COVID. I went out there and you see the White House on TV, you see Capitol Hill on TV, and it looks so big and so grand. And then you get there and you're like, well, Capitol Hill's pretty big, but all these things, and you're like, it feels so unattainable.
Yeah.
But when you're there, you're walking into their office. You don't have to have an appointment. You can just walk in anytime,
Interesting.
I recommend doing it with kindness, but walk in, and you can these people really want to hear you. And after, doing this here in the state of Florida, I'm actually going, like I said, I'm going on a trip tomorrow, and these legislators get to know you after time. And, some switch in, some switch out over the years. But, last year we were at the NARPM Stay on the Hill, and before I left one of the offices, the legislator followed me on Instagram. I mean, I have a couple of them follow me now, a little flex on it, but
that's cool.
But it's like they really do want to hear from me, and they follow up and they email, and I see them at local events here. My biggest thing I can push to people is it's not what happens on the Hill. That is only a little piece of it. It's what's happening in your district. Go to them when they're in town. Go to their district office. Talk to their aides. That's where the magic happens. Those aides are the ones that turn the neck a little bit. They're the ones that are out there with their finger on the pulse, and they're telling them this is what we're hearing. So
the power of the gatekeeper is very real.
Know your gatekeeper.
Yeah.
Get hey, bring in some chocolates. Nothing too expensive because they have limits, but really building those relationships and being consistent. That's when you're going to see change. Like, when we go up there, they're like, oh, you're with this. I remember that association. I remember this association, and so stay consistent is the biggest thing, and building those relationships, like anything. I'm very big on relationships. I always say I build a relationship one door at a time, and it's that consistency and making sure you're bridging those gaps. Cause they're like, when they have that problem come up, they're like, oh, let me reach out to them. They might have some insight for me. And it has happened. And, we're pushing some new bills here in Florida. Notices is a big thing. So they're really kind of, through the relationships, we're able to get those bills kind of going and on the floor. So we're hoping to see that one come through here in Florida this year, because there's so much regulation on 3-day notices and the safety issues around it. So it's very important that we're out there taking the problems that we're seeing on the day-to-day and turning that into legislation that's going to help the industry, not hurt the industry. And also, one of the things that I always want to put out here is we don't only advocate for landlords, we advocate for equality between tenants and landlords. Yeah. So yes, we have a fiduciary responsibility to our clients and our owners, but we don't want to see negative things happen to the tenant side of things either. So we want to make sure that these bills that are being passed are equal for both parties, but keeps that middle ground so everyone's allowed to do what they need to do and live happy.
It sounds like, again, this sounds like my idea of a good time, because I think we're kind of like similar animals in the sense that we like talking to people, we like influence, things like that. But the
Hey, well, I'll talk to you.
yeah, exactly. But the idea sounds like you're going up there on these trips. You are going office to office to talk to influential people. They want to talk to you, and you're like, hey, here's what I think you should think about in this thing that really, really affects me. And maybe you're bringing their aid, something, and then you're just kind of following up and building these relationships with folks that, whether it's some point down the line, there's a law coming down, and now you become like somebody that they're like, oh, I need extra perspective. This person seemed intriguing, or they're coming to your district and you get to go like shake hands. It feels like a really good path to influence in general for your business, for your personal life, those kinds of things. Is that right?
Yeah, you're advocating for your business. You're advocating for your rights, as a lot of property managers are investors as well, and they have properties. So you're out there, you're making a difference not only for yourself, for your business, but for everyone. Because, like I said, if they only know what they know,
Yeah.
and if they don't know these things, and they have this perception of whatever this issue is, they're going to make that decision on that perception. But if you show them the other side, that's how great things happen, is when you kind of listen to a full picture of things. You're like, okay, we can maybe make this edit so that doesn't happen, or maybe we should roll this back a little bit and see how we can make this not that. And it's very much, politics is politics, and it's all about who you know, who's in the room, and if you're not in the room, you're gonna have some things that affect you, and it's very important to stay ahead of that. So you need to know, we're so lucky. And the National Association of Registered Property Managers, the governmental affairs team, really has the finger of the pulse. They know, they're walking the halls every day. They're building those relationships. Little shout out to Tyler Craddock on there. He texts me things that, before they break in the news, that are pretty big. And I'm like, he's like, this is coming. And I'm like, whoa. I was like, maybe you got to listen when he speaks. So there's been a couple things. I don't want to say what they were, but there's been some things he's texted me in advance, like, this is happening at this time on this date, and it happens. And they're like big things. So it's like, they know, they're walking those halls. They know what's going on. They're building those relationships for us throughout the year. We go up there once a year, maybe twice a year. I go through a couple different organizations throughout the year, but they're up there every day. The people that are on the government affairs team are lobbyists. Those are the ones that are really making the magic happen, because they're truly building those relationships, and they're making sure that we have that voice. And when things do come up, they are there to talk about it and advocate for us.
Awesome. And I kind of like dug in a couple of times, because I'm trying to paint the picture to our friend that's listening, this idea of, hey, this is important, because if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. This is not as hard as it sounds. It's actually pretty enjoyable. It's beneficial to you and your career and the industry and your clients and all this type of stuff. And the way you get involved is essentially joining the government regulations. So it's like kind of like call to arms of, this is worthwhile for you. If you're, just like we're saying, invest in technology, invest in this, right? Because this is a game changer for you. What are the things that they should be getting involved in, right? Like, what is on the menu right now? Let's talk about kind of like the big issues that are up for grabs nationally. And then, let's start there. Well, like you just got back from DC. Like, what are the big issues that are up for grab nationally?
So taxes, that's the biggest thing, property taxes, all these different forms of taxes. 1031s are just the big one right now, making sure that those remain in place.
Feels like 1031s are always, like every election, every like presidential election, 1031 becomes a thing, right?
Money, who would have thought?
Yeah, who would have thought? Who would have thought? Yeah.
With taxes, and one of the biggest things I think that kind of affects everyone equally is Section 8 reform. That's a really big one. It's become a topic that people don't want to talk about, but it is something that's so important to our community. We had earlier this year, when those executive orders were rolling out, that stopping this.
Yeah.
People's lives went. Like, how am I going to put food on my table? It's a much bigger picture, and people need to understand that. So, for example, we're in Central Florida, so we are in 6 different counties. That is 8 different housing authorities. All 8 of those housing authorities do everything differently. So some are only by mail, some are online. So think about that, and the inefficiencies that are just in that portion of it, like just the actual. Then in Orlando specifically, the voucher list opened up for like 3 hours for the first time in like 8-9 years. So just those inconsistencies and those kind of things, and just making sure, we want to make sure that everyone has, let me make this very clear. Everyone has a right to housing. It's not a privilege. It's a right. Yep. Everyone should be able to get housing. Fair housing is one of the biggest things that we push in, especially in our company, is, transparency in that, and making sure that you understand that everyone has a right to this. And it's not up to me, it's not up to you, it's not up to anyone else in the room to decide that you shouldn't do this unless it's, for rightful reasons. Yeah. But,
Sounds like you're saying everybody has a right to housing. You're also saying people have a right to own their own property as well.
Exactly.
Right. So it's like walking that fine line.
Within reason, that's the thing. There's that fine line.
Yeah, and you got to continually draw that line so people are not making uneducated decisions one way or the other. Is kind of what I see the role.
And the perception of things, can sometimes be shadowed on by certain situations. Especially in property management, you hear, they had a bad experience with a property manager, so all property managers are like this.
Correct.
And that's not how it is. And we just, our job as property managers and professional property managers is to educate our clients on every possible aspect of what outcome. Yes, with Section 8, you have inspections that are required, so maybe a little longer, vacancy time just to accommodate that. And that's another thing with Section 8 is the inspection periods. And, they have rents have skyrocketed over the years, so Section 8 they had to get more stringent on their inspections, which is okay. But we need to educate them of how this might play out. And my philosophy is I'd rather over-explain to you. I'd rather you ask me 1,000 questions. I'd rather give you everything so that you can have a full understanding, so there's no surprises later. And one of the biggest topics, and that's affecting kind of every property manager right now, is the EPA laws that were passed. So basically, the EPA removed some FAQs a while back, and it basically put on to the property manager that you need to be EPA certified. So basically lead safe certification. So basically anyone working on a pre-1978 property must have this certification so they can understand how to, one, not disturb lead-based paint, things like that. I mean, it's a very small portion, but the fees and the stuff that they've implemented. So essentially there's two things you got to worry about is when you have a lead-based paint property, you have to provide the tenant with a pamphlet. You have to provide a disclosure to them saying that either the owner is aware of lead-based paint or they're not aware of lead-based paint. There's probably like 6 initials on that page and then a signature. You miss one of those, how much do you think they cost? They're going to fine you. Just on one property.
$6,000.
$25,000.
Jesus Christ.
One initial.
Yeah. The property manager gets this fined, or the landlord?
The property manager, the professional who has submitted that form, is because they'll come do an audit on you essentially. Wow. And so if you have that's $25,000 a day.
So what can you advocate in that regard? Like, so that's happening. They're putting that in there. There's a part of it that's like be informed and that's happening. But what about this like governmental affairs advocacy? What is being advocated for there?
So to put it this way and kind of make it simple is I hire a plumber to come replumb my house. Okay. I'm not the licensed person. The plumber's the licensed person.
Yeah.
Okay. So why do I need to get a plumber's license to hire a plumber? And that's the other aspect of it is making sure that your vendors have the certification, because if they're working on anything they're doing in a pre-1970 home, they need that. And so we're running compliance on their business. And so if they don't have it, we're responsible for that. So, but now property managers are like, my firm is licensed. Yeah. We have this certification, and just because it's...
What did that cost to do?
Don't quote me on that. It's fairly reasonable.
But you need somebody to come in and do it and take a test, and it's a pain in the ass.
You're supposed to have multiple people doing it too.
Yeah.
So, if whoever's involved in your maintenance, should have that knowledge, and it is very important. Let me make sure they're making that clear as well. It's very important, but the way they went about it is, it's like, we're not here to babysit vendors. We're not here to make sure they have their certifications. I understand there is some kind of oversight in that, and it should be allowed. But why are we being penalized for them not doing what they were supposed to do? Or you shouldn't have to worry about. But in that fee, and that one's $37,500.
Jesus.
So a day. And we had Monica Gilroy in DC, and she was scaring everyone in the room. And it wasn't because she wanted to; it was because of how serious it is. And
she was scaring you guys or the senators?
No, us, and we were doing it. So the Capitol Hill Summit, it's a legislative conference. And then there is an actual day on the Hill, so it's educating us on the things that are going on. So they bring in different speakers, you get to meet the vendors, all that kind of stuff. So they've transformed that in the past couple of years, which has been great because you get a little more education out of it. You're not just going to the Hill, blind.
Yeah,
And it was very interesting, like just like the way she has that firsthand experience working with these auditors and clients of hers who have received those things.
Yeah.
And it's something you don't think about, and you really need to think about this. Like, what would a $25,000 a day fine do to your business?
Yeah.
That's huge.
Kill your business.
Done.
Right, like,
And over a simple clerical error because you missed one initial.
Yeah.
Think about that little thing. You did everything right. You provided the pamphlet. You provided the form. The owner signed it. The tenant signed it. But the tenant missed one initial, or the owner missed one initial.
Yeah.
And you're being held responsible. And yes, there's definitely some checks and balances of how I can see it there, but you got to make sure that other people's decisions and things aren't affecting your business.
So what I'm hearing as far as like stuff on the table and why I should care and how I can move the needle, it's like 1031 exchanges always on the table. That could affect kind of like market size from like investors. Mm-hmm. Section 8, the inspection is around Section 8. The subsidies for Section 8 could really affect that whole housing stock and how you operationalize around that housing stock. I'm hearing this lead-based paint thing feels like what you're working on here is like, hey, let's right size these fines and let's make sure that it's like we're really putting the onus on people that we really care about, because this is one of these things that, hey, Mr. Senator, Mrs. Representative, are you really asking us to be in charge of this thing? And if we are the right person, is it really something that you want to expose us to a $300,000 fine for a small business that might net in revenue $1 million a year? Like, you're essentially kicking us out of business if you're not getting this right? And those are the types of conversations you're having.
Yeah, no, and it's that, and it's clarity, because these literally just came off the EPA's website overnight, and that's how it all started. They just disappeared, and there was no transparency in it, and there was no guidance in the very beginning. That was the big thing, is we didn't know what our responsibilities were, and there was so much confusion, and there wasn't the education to the consumer. But it was like, listen, you're now responsible for this.
Yeah,
that's your job now. But we had no on the job, we had no training, we had no manual, we had no nothing. We were kind of we have been learning from other people's mistakes.
Yeah.
And making sure that, we're providing clarity is the most important thing for our business. We want to make sure that we're transparent with our owners, our clients, our vendors. And let me say this is a call to action. Vendors, lock in now, because if...
Lock into what?
Lock into advocating for the industry as well.
Yeah.
Because if our businesses suffer, yours are going to suffer.
Oh shit! Yeah.
And making sure that you guys, there's been some of the companies that are out there that have really been out there, and they're putting their foot forward, coming with us as Days on the Hill, supporting the Days on the Hill.
Yeah.
And it doesn't start, like I said, it doesn't start on the Hill. It starts in those relationships. It starts in the district's office. It starts in your own office. It starts just educating yourself, being aware of what these laws are coming, and what is affecting you on a day-to-day basis. That's how I always say a law is started from someone who's pissed, someone who wants to make money, or someone who just has a lot of time in their hands. And usually the third one. No, or the
plus something else.
Plus something else. But so, if there's an issue you see in your business, go talk to a legislator. Tell them, say, hey, this is affecting us. This is changing our market. This is, one of the big things that is happening everywhere is rezoning. All these, especially like in downtown, post-COVID, downtowns have been struggling to keep businesses in there, to keep tenants in there. And so all these around the country, they're doing these revitalizations and these really big pushes to get them back. Here in Orlando, they've done so many great things. They've put in green spaces. They've put in all these different art installations just to draw people downtown.
Placemaking.
And it's, the rezoning and just really putting those efforts into those things that, that are going to then boost the economy as a whole.
Outside of joining the NARPM Governmental Affairs Committee and therefore like being fed this information, how do you find time to like stay up on this stuff, man? Like, how do you find time to like balance the effort that it would take to not just go to Day on the Hill, right? Because I think what I'm hearing right now is like, and this is why I wanted you on the show, is because I found out about Day on the Hill way too late. I'm like, that sounds like a super valuable time to be spending, right? Like, it feels like you're going to get a very high level room being educated on the things that are really affecting the industry. And then you're going to go do the thing that Americans can do that other countries can't freaking do. And we should all do it, right? Outside of those 48-hour period where you're saying these relationships and getting involved locally and stuff like that and keeping it going, what does that look like and how do you find the time for it?
Okay, so let me also say this in the sense of you do not have to go to the day on the hill to make a difference.
Yeah.
You do not have to go to your legislators to make a difference.
Yeah.
I am a glutton for punishment, and I am on like 4 or 5 different legislative bodies. So the easiest one you could probably use is your local chamber.
Yeah. True.
So
That's why we're here.
Yeah, exactly why we're here.
Yeah.
And so like here at the East Orlando Chamber, they have, they bring in legislators on a monthly basis to come talk to you, so you can get in front of them there. But you're also looking at the issues that are going around in your community, because it doesn't have to be just property management. It could be your local community. What's going on?
Yeah.
Your local elections. The biggest thing is get out and vote. That's our biggest thing.
I get out and vote, man, but I have such a hard time understanding who I'm voting for. Like I'll see like R and D, and I don't really like to choose from party lines, but when there's like a big ballot of like a local election and it's just one flyer versus another, I have a really hard time figuring out how to use a scalpel to figure out who I want versus just like a sledgehammer of just like R or D or whatever it's going to be, right?
There's never a perfect answer. There's never one that is always going to be the sure shot.
Yeah.
And for me, with all the organizations I'm part of and the rooms that I'm in, there's always both sides.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing I can push is just respect. Respect other people, respect their beliefs. As long as you're not putting anyone else down in that process, or
Yeah.
we can all get along. We can all play in the sandbox.
Yeah.
And
So say the respect is there, like, and I'm honestly just asking for practical advice for myself, right? Like, is it normal to just kind of, I know I'm an environmental nut, so somebody campaigning on like a green kind of like cause probably going to get my vote. And I feel that most people just kind of like pick one cause and go for whoever's with that cause. But then I feel like a certain level of guilt because then I get called a one issue voter. But at the end of the day, it's just kind of like get involved in the thing that you care about and like bet on it, right?
whatever it is to get you involved is what you need to do. You don't have to know everything. You don't have to look at their whole history of things. If there's, make sure you do your research. There's enough resources out there with the World Wide Web these days.
I feel like I feel like a good perplexity search is better than like an old Google search nowadays.
Yeah, and like go to the local party that's in your area. They're usually pushing out good information. I always say this: look at both sides. You don't have to be. There's no straight line in politics. And you want to make sure that you're doing your research to make sure that it's someone that you can say that you can stand behind. We see that a lot. People throw a name out, they endorse it, and they pull back. Someone once said to me is, once you give support, you can't take that back. So sit back a little bit, maybe a little more, listen a little more.
Okay.
And then once you can always add support later, but you can't take it back. And let me say this:
once you support someone
openly, yeah,
correct,
exactly. And do whatever you don't have to talk. You don't have to be boastful out there. I don't post my politics out there crazily. I'm not shy from it, but I'm not out there, doing the Twitter post every day. And it's just whatever is true to you is all I can say is what you should do. I don't ever judge anyone for how they voted. If you voted for a bad movie, then that we may have a problem with that. But politics wise, just whatever you feel like you can stand behind, you can stand on the stage and say, this is for me. You don't have to do that. But if that's what you're looking for, just something that you can feel good about when you close your eyes at night and say that, okay, I made this decision and I'm halfway okay with it.
yeah, for sure. All right, so I'm here to be kind to yourself, make a decision, but participate in the process. It's something that I always participate, and then I often struggle of like I wish I was more informed. So I go back to this topic of like time to do this stuff, man. Is it really? It sounds like for you, you're obviously a high energy guy. You're obviously an organized guy. You get stuff done. But there's also a certain level of like integration in the sense that if you are getting involved with your local chamber, you are getting involved in the NARPM Governmental Affairs Committee, you are going to learn some stuff through osmosis where you don't have to take as much deliberate time to then get involved, to get informed on something. So it like behooves us to join these causes and just like have it on the schedule that I have this meeting for the chamber once a month and for the governmental affairs committee once a month, so that at least I have a baseline of this, and then I'm just sprinkling other things on. Is that I mean, I'm just trying to like systematize this for myself.
So you don't have to go to all the meetings. You'll do that. And the great thing is nowadays, a lot of them are virtual.
Yeah.
So NARPM National, they do state and local. They do the government affairs. They do federal subcommittee.
Yeah.
So you can pick what you want. You don't have to do everything. You don't have to do everything. Just do a little something. Educate yourself slowly. My philosophy is surround yourself with smarter people at all times. And you're going to learn something.
Yeah.
And making sure that do you want to wait a couple of years and not do anything and then have all the time in the world because your business has been shuttered by legislation?
Correct.
So,
Correct.
It's like I said, we're paying back to it. It's either have a seat at the table or you're on the menu. And once you're on the menu, the plate's clean, you're gone.
Yeah.
You don't have to do everything. You don't have to be crazy like me and do everything. I do everything. But that's because I enjoy it. It's a passion for me. And I would rather do that than, go listen to something about accounting, that doesn't do anything. This is where I find my happiness.
Yeah. And there's something about finding that person on your team that wants to get involved on this thing too, right? Like I assume that you bring great value to your team by being the person that can carry this flag. And there are indicators of folks that care about this stuff and they can bring it back to the office, right?
Yeah, no, and it doesn't have to be you. Find someone that does enjoy it.
Yeah.
Thankfully in our office, my broker Maria, she is locked in. She's into it too. She's into it too.
Okay.
She goes to the Days on the Hill. She goes to the Great American Realtor Days. She's visiting her grandbaby for his first birthday, so she's not going to be at this one. She's very upset about it. Yeah. But it's find someone that does enjoy it, and then have them lock in, and then have them update you. Yeah. And there's other ways. NARPM puts out newsletters. Just read those. Read the residential resources. Read the Florida Realtors magazine. Read whatever magazine that they're talking about it. I trust you. They're talking about it. It may be a little further in, but it's gonna be front page one day. And when it is, you want to know what's going on.
Yeah. Okay. I think we're pretty good there. Are there any other juicy things to be on the lookout for? Right. So that there's 1031. There's Section 8. There is squatters' rights. That's kind of going state to state. So that's like a local thing to start kind of like looking for. What was the other one after Section 8? Lead-based paint, right? So I know that broker owner, they're having like a whole session on like lead-based paint. Now I know.
I think they're doing a certification class there too.
Yeah, now I know where it's coming from.
It's that important. No, it's it is the biggest issue.
Any other big hot topics coming down the pike from like a national or local level for people to just kind of like have it in their reticular activator for it to ping?
The biggest one right now is just the respect for state housing law. States should be able to do what they want to do in their own state, and then anytime there is government overreach, that's when things kind of things operate differently.
Yep.
And just making sure that you're advocating for your state. So funny story, Florida. Mm-hmm. You would think that ACs would be in the law somewhere. It is not. You are not by law required to have an AC.
Yeah, interesting.
But you are required to have heat.
Oh wow.
And screens, all these like weird little laws that I said. So if someone wanted to make money, they were upset, or they just had extra time on their hands.
Yeah, I guess nobody sweats to death, but they can freeze to death more often, right? I guess so.
And then you can get eaten up
and
by
the laws
mosquitoes.
come down from the north, so like they have that in there, and it just gets like built in. Whereas like air conditioning was a newer invention. So, anyways, I'm nerding out too much.
No, and it's like, would you do what is in let's say New Hampshire, why would we pass a law about snow here? So making sure that every place is different, and you should be able to have those, when laws supersede state laws, that's when things can sometimes get gray. Yeah. And because they're not thinking about the specific of that state. Thankfully Florida is a very landlord friendly state, and we have a very good amount of professional property managers in the state that are doing things right. But the people that they're making these laws about are the people that aren't doing it right. And those are the ones you got to really be concerned about, is because one bad apple can spoil the whole bunch, and totally. You making sure that you're doing things right. If you're doing things right, you're following the laws, you're good. But if you're not, that's why people create laws, is because they've hurt tenants, they've charged them, they haven't disclosed these fees to them, they've, all these different things. Just make sure that, I always say the golden rule too, just do unto others as you're going to do unto you. You want to be done unto you. And, that's how you should really, in business and life, just make sure that when you go to bed, you haven't done anything that's gonna make you feel some type of way,
totally.
Or have your mom call you and yell at you.
Yeah, man. All right, I want to talk about as I'm out there talking about how this space is rapidly changing, and how there is the downside of this like innovator's dilemma of all of a sudden the world changes and the person that's like in pole position all of a sudden is out of business, or they've just lost their position because they were too attached to the past to like adapt to the future. And then there's this idea of category creation where, when this thing changes, it is the opportunity for the up and coming property manager to disrupt the incumbent that's owning the market. The number one thing I hear when I have this conversation with people of people are going to get disrupted is, or I'm just like, dude, cabs were really hanging on to their medallion and then Uber came along and like destroyed it. I hear, yeah, but the legislation, right? Like the legality and the policies and all this type of stuff. And I feel like that feels like the easiest thing to get disrupted by technology. Like, how do you, as somebody that's like deep in this, do you see a world where it's like impossible to pierce that moat? Or do you see a world where there is an AI application that can all of a sudden take somebody from not super informed and be like, oh, you're about to go deal with this thing? These are the things that you need to worry about legally. What do you think of that?
I think that the industry's probably changed while I've been sitting here doing this
Totally.
podcast.
Yeah.
And I have a funny example. Let me say this.
Yeah.
So I was scrolling. I was on a work trip recently, and I was scrolling in my hotel room, and I was scrolling, and it caught. Don't ask me why it caught my eye, but it said something along the lines of it was like one of those what do you call them, the quick grab.
Okay.
It was like Cameron Diaz recalls the time when she realized that her life, the celebrity was gone and changed forever once cell phones came out. So they were filming, they were doing the premiere in, I think, Japan, don't quote me on that, for Charlie's Angels 2. And they walked out of their hotel room, and all these people were out there, and they had these things above their head. She's like, their translator that was with them, she's like, what are those things above their head? And she goes, those are phones, they're recording you. And she says, you just saw our faces go, whew. And they literally they knew that it was over for them. The celebrity they knew wasn't over because of this new technology that came into
No
place.
more privacy.
No more
whatsoever.
privacy.
Yeah.
And you remember you see the celebrities walking down the street with a bottle of champagne and all these things, living their best life in the Studio 54, and that now a celebrity can't walk out there anywhere.
A big change in context. Camera phones come out. All of a sudden, you can't take a bong hit at a party like Michael Phelps did.
Yep.
Right? I remember that very well.
Yes, that was big in that moment, and that changed. That changes things, but all these little things like the privacy and that's going to happen in AI too.
Yep.
The AI aspect of things, where it really kind of started shedding light in kind of I would say the broader national spectrum was when they were making the AI videos of celebrities saying things, endorsing things.
Yeah, that is one video,
I
right?
can't remember who it was, but he has in his contract that they cannot AI anything on him. I can't remember who it was, but it's like
sounds like a Daniel Day-Lewis thing.
I don't know. It was Morgan M. Freeman if you watched the Oscars the other night. Just those little things. It's like you don't know what's going to happen until it does happen. Then you're like, whoa, I don't like that. I don't want people going out there saying, things that I'm not saying because of AI.
Yeah.
AI is a great thing.
Yeah.
As any innovation is, it's scary in the beginning.
Yep.
It can get even scarier down the line. We don't know what's going to happen. It's just making sure that you're doing the right thing and you're staying educated on it, because I'll admit it. A couple years ago, I was like, AI. I was like, oh, this ChatGPT thing. I'm like, now that I've locked into it, videos, ChatGPT, all these different things, my life has become so much more. I've had more free time to do the things I love.
If you understand that change is coming and AI is this giant industrial revolution, you're going to want to work with a company that is AI by DNA. And that, my friend, is Vendoroo. We are a native agentic AI solution built from the ground up with this assumption that the AI future is here. And what Vendoroo does, it is able to handle 80 to 85% of all maintenance work orders from beginning to end, while elevating that extra 15 to 20% so that you can actually take care of it. And most importantly, just getting you out of the grind and the forever firefight of maintenance so you can do other things. Like one of our clients hired Vendoroo.ai, and within 6 months, the amount of time that saved her from maintenance, she dedicated herself to business development. She started adding 10 doors a month over the last 6 months. It's been 60 new doors. It's been a huge change, huge growth for her business, way more profitable. So if you want to do that, you want to get yourself out of the mundane, get your team out of the mundane, let them focus on stuff that really, really matters. Go to Vendoroo.ai, book a demo with us, and we would love to help you build an agentic AI property management business. Vendoroo.ai, book a demo. Enjoy the rest of the show.
I was pushing back in the very beginning, and that's okay. You can push back, but you're going to eventually have to realize that you got to bring this in and you got to embrace it, because guess what? Company B down there, they started embracing it 2 years ago, and they're way ahead of the game. Now you are behind. And so when you're meeting those clients, or whatever it may be, I was talking to a client that she's like, what are your, her first question out of her mouth was, what technologies are you using?
Interesting.
She's like, what technologies are you using? Because that was important to her. Yeah. She wants to make sure that she can access her things. She can see, what's going on with her property. And because like she said, she was with another property manager previously that was kind of, back in their case. They were still doing paper statements and things like that. And like those little things matter. Getting things to your email.
How old was this client? Estimate. Millennial, boomer, Gen Xer?
I'd say she's probably in her 30s, early 40s, maybe.
Millennial.
Yeah. So, I'm not exactly. She's definitely she's definitely
makes sense. Yeah.
But and it's like for me that's important too. Like I want to make sure that when I'm doing things, we want that. It's the Amazon effect, I call it. You're getting that
100%
notification, everything in 2 hours. Yeah. I'll sit in bed at night and I'll buy things. If it could be a $500 thing. Yeah. If I have to wait 2 days for it, absolutely not. But if I can get it tomorrow morning by the time I wake up, okay, that sounds great. Yeah. But if I have to wait, and if I have time to think about it, and it's just that we want that instant gratification. We want to be able to access the information when we want to access that information.
It's interesting that you say that, man. I host this other podcast called the Not Your Average Investor Show for JWB, and they're a $6,000 property manager, but because they built a turnkey rental property investing operation, right? So like they've kind of always had the investor mindset. And in the evangelizing that I do over there, I'm talking about exactly what you just said. When you are looking for a property manager, ask them their tech stack, right? Like you and I've never not done mobile banking, right? Like
if I have to go inside the bank, if the ATM is not working, I need cash. Absolutely not. Driving 10 miles down the road.
Forget it, right? Yeah. So like this idea that, as the other big context shift that we just published something on was the generational context shift of like boomers are passing away. They're giving their portfolios to their millennial children and whatnot. And the idea that you're going to be able to say, oh, you're just going to have to wait till the end of the year till I reconcile your statement to give you anything is way off. If you got to wait quarterly, right? Like, the idea of like needing instant access, because the world around us has changed and it has conditioned us to having instant access to information. And not just that, you and I grew up in an era where information was not really like an advantage. Like pre-internet, you could be like, who did win the Oscar in 1992, right? Like today you're just like, Google it, right? So that piece of it is going to be completely devalued of whatever data advantage we used to have. And it's going to really be more about this, what kind of, A, transparency is going to be ubiquitous, and B, it's going to be, what kind of experience can you give me? Like, how much time do you have, to your point, right? Like, you've implemented AI for yourself in a way that's allowed you to have more time to do other things, like become a GIA, SEO, and things of the sort, right? But, like, it's really about, like, using AI to free yourself to do the stuff that only a human can do, and think in like experiences and think in like ways that you can guide it, right?
Yeah, and perfect example, you said the SEO stuff. For me, the coding aspect of it. It can code for you. I've learned to code from ChatGPT coding, and like I didn't know how to bold something, or it's definitely a little more than that, but like you can teach yourself new skills. And that's the thing. My philosophy for myself is, like I said, one, surround yourself with smart people. But if you make yourself to the point where you are everything, you can do everything. Like I said, I've worked my way up through the property management industry, and I've done kind of like every aspect except maintenance. You don't want me really doing maintenance, so that's why we hired you guys.
That's fine. That's what we're here for, bud. Nobody wants to do maintenance.
And when you make yourself that resource, and so when owners talk to me, they're asking about, I can sell it all because I know it, I've lived it, and the transparency thing you touched on. That's a non-negotiable.
It's a non-negotiable.
It's non-negotiable. If you are not being transparent with your client, you are not doing your client any favors. Yeah. One of our core values is transparency. We lead with that in every aspect that we do. You can see everything. You have access to everything. You know what's going on with your property. The biggest thing I hear from clients is, I didn't know what was going on with my property until I got my statement, and I was expecting this much money, and I got this much money. You're going to feel some type of way. So if you cut that off in the very beginning and say, here, access, maintenance request, notification, you got it. You don't have to do anything, but it gives you that time to jump in and say, hey, I have a warranty on this, or I have a preferred vendor for this, It gives you that time to feel like you have that finger in, but you don't really have to do it. And when you give that transparency, you're usually given a little more freedom in yourself and your business, because a lot of times you're managing properties and assets for other people. And so that takes a lot of trust, and that builds trust. That's the biggest thing for us, is really building that trust. If you don't trust me, and if I can't get that trust from you in the very beginning, I probably won't get it, because what did I do to you that made you put your wall up? And not every client is for you. And that's the biggest thing you can take away from a lot of things, is not every client is for you. It's like a relationship dating, not everyone is meant for each other. Some people, you have a visceral reaction as soon as you see them, then you might really click with this person. Find the property manager that you do click with. Find the association or the chamber that you do click with. Find the crazy podcasters that you do click with.
Well, you got what I mean.
Just do what's right for you, what feels right for you. Just like when you're buying something or doing business with someone, you do with people you know, like, and trust. That's proven. And if you don't trust someone, that's just gonna make an experience bad for both of you. You're gonna have to break up, and it's gonna be a Brad and Angelina Joe pit all over the news. Just try to avoid that. Take your time in the beginning. Ask those questions. Stay knowledgeable on what it is.
I like it, man. Anything else we haven't hit on from the standpoint of like getting involved, how to do it, or any other kind of like change in the world that you see out there?
Do what you can. Don't feel like you have to do it all. And that's one thing. Anything that I do whenever I'm, chairing something or on a leadership role, I always tell people, unless it's some specific thing, we have these specific guidelines, give me what you can. Show up. We'll meet you where you are. And, if you can tune into the podcast on legislation, there's so many of them out there. Listen to it. Well, while you're at the gym or while you're in the car, lock into the research. There's so many resources out there if you just look for it. Your associations, your chambers, your local political committees and things like that. Go sit in one of your local commissioners, one of their meetings. Go sit on a zoning board meeting. You learn a lot. There's so much that happens right in your community, and that's the biggest thing. Forget the federal. Do where you live. Go make a difference because that's how it starts. You start at home, and then that's how things get bigger. And go make sure that you're even if you're not building a relationship, make sure you're staying knowledgeable for yourself, because your communities offer so many programs. They offer these programs that teach governmental affairs. I did the City of Orlando's Mayor Academy last year. It was a 12-week program.
That's cool.
And they kind of take you all around. I always was very locked in on the state and federal level, but not in my local level. And just the stuff that they do, my favorite part was like the water plant. Like, you don't know how crazy water plants are. And it's just like all these little things. Just take as much as you do what you can, and really just put your best foot forward every morning. Go out and do right, and don't try to steal from anyone. Don't try to take from anyone. Just make a difference. When you go to bed at night, just make sure that you could feel like you've done good and that you've tried to make the world a better place.
I love it, man. I'm really grateful that Lacey introduced us, right? Because I feel whatever frequency, vibration, whatever it is, right? Like, I feel like you and I are both fast talking, love to get into stuff and do things. And I'm really grateful that we could have this, right? Because this idea of how underrated it is to get involved in things, kind of in Lacey's episode also, we just talked about this idea of you get involved with something, you think it's going to be for one benefit, and at the end of the day, you've developed all these other skill sets that you came with getting involved. You've developed all these other relationships that came to getting involved, and more than anything, I just wanted to shine a light on this idea that, man, you can be doing everything right, but if you don't have a seat at the table, you don't have influence, you're on the menu. So, and I think you provided that well, and beyond that, man, I'm just pumped to hang out with you. I feel like we're just kind of like two birds of a feather here. Can't wait to go to this basketball game. I appreciate you letting me come down here, setting all this stuff up, and I'm pumped to just back up whatever you're doing on governmental affairs from here on out, man.
Awesome. Well, we'll see you next year at Dan in the Hills and every other thing.
For sure.
Live podcast coming soon.